We stand now where two roads diverge, but unlike the roads in Robert Frost's familiar poem, they are not equally fair. The road we have long been traveling is deceptively easy, a smooth superhighway on which we progress at great speed, but at its end lies disaster. The other fork on the road, the one less traveled by, offers our last, our only chance to reach a destination that assures the preservation of our Earth. The choice, after all, is ours to make. Rachel Carson, Silent Spring.
In 1895, the Pennsylvania Game Commission was wrought out of concern for the loss of landscape and devastation of wildlife populations due to market hunting. Joseph Kalbfuss, Charles Penrose, and John Phillips were some of the first men to come together and take action for Pennsylvania's hunting and wildlife heritage. By 1905, land began to be purchased as part of a refuge system following the enactment of the State Game Refuge Law. The first purchase was south of Renovo and is now part of Sproul State Forest. The main purpose of the refuge system was to propagate wild game and give them a place to rest where they could not be pursued. Land was purchased with the idea of creating little Yellowstones within the state of Pennsylvania to hold on to places where wildlife could thrive and propagate. But in 1918, Joseph Kalbfuss addressed the Board of Commissioners.
I believe it would be far better to have a law passed that would authorize the Game Commission to spend a part of the Sportsman's Fund annually for the purchase of land that would be open to the use of sportsmen forever, such lands being held perpetually for public game preserve purposes, only so the privilege of hunting is maintained.
And so in 1920, the first state game land was purchased in Elk County, which is now known as State Game Lands 25. During the Depression, land was made more affordable by separating the mineral rights from the surface rights. And despite the difficult times, the Game Commission was still able to add to its holdings. However, there was and still is a limit to what the Pennsylvania Game Commission can spend per acre on lands. In 1920, $2.75 per acre was the limit. Sometime around the 1940s, the Pennsylvania Game Commission began forming partnerships with other organizations in order to secure acreage which would have otherwise been out of reach financially. For a state wildlife agency to manage such a huge land base is unique. Pennsylvania is the only state that has an independent wildlife management agency that owns and manages such extensive lands.
The state game lands are managed solely by the Pennsylvania Game Commission, which is actually unique for a state wildlife agency to have sole management responsibility over such a large tract of land, which for us is 1.5 million acres. So we have multiple partners on any given project on the game lands, and those partnerships are extremely important with what we can do managing going forward.
So what we're looking at today is Game Lands 38, and which borders the Bethlehem Water Authority, the Nature Conservancy, and a project that we put together between the three property owners to manage about 1,500 acres of Pocono Barrens. The Barrens area is kind of unique to the area because of the plant species and wildlife that it has here. And the benefit is really for managing for snowshoe hare, wild turkey, black bear, deer, and even golden-winged warbler. The area historically has always had fire. Ideally, we'd like to try to come back and reburn this about every 10, 15 years.
One of the greatest threats to wildlife today and wildlife conservation is the threat of development. Over 300 acres of open space and habitat are lost per day in Pennsylvania. And that's why the game lands and the continued acquisition of game lands and other public conservation lands is so important.
The Pennsylvania Game Commission is divided into 6 regions, each with assigned land managers who oversee habitat projects at their respective game lands. Land managers prescribe various management practices with oversight from Harrisburg on game lands and leased properties, which are carried out by the Game Commission's food and cover crews and regional foresters. Whether it's controlled burns, food plots, wetland creation, herbicide application, placing and maintaining nesting structures, brush removal, periodic mowing, or tree felling, our staff are capable of creating wildlife habitat.
So a big part of what we do on the game lands is habitat restoration. And over the years, quite honestly, we haven't gotten a lot of prime farm ground. We've been able to get some land that in the past perhaps has been abused by past practices. So a lot of what we do is restoration of habitats, whether that's acid mine drainage restoration, water quality restoration, or reclaiming abandoned coal mines, for example. Those restorative practices are a lot of what we do on the game lands, because a lot of the pieces of ground we get are in pretty bad shape when we first get them. Some of the practices we do with managing fields or meadows or wildlife openings, that's primarily done by our food and cover crews. Some of the practices include things like planting, disking, mowing, the use of prescribed fire, and those herbaceous habitats, those fields, are really important for a lot of species that depend on them. Forest management is a very important part of what we do on the game lands. Our game lands are well over 90% forested. And with forest management in general, what we're trying to do is intersperse different age classes of forest across the landscape. Having some young forest next to some older forest interspersed with middle-aged forest. This provides for maximum habitat diversity, providing for the most species out on the landscape. If we think of white-tailed deer, for example, they're going to really depend on those young forest areas for browse, for cover, for fawning cover, but they're also going to depend on the older forest areas for things like acorns and hardmast. So it's very important when we're developing forest management plans that we're interspersing these different age habitats across the landscape. And the way we do that, our primary means, is through commercial timber sales. And in the process generate some revenue for the agency, but also create some of those different habitat conditions, those young forest conditions across the landscape. The situation on Game Lands 252, where we've done a lot of restoration, is one that we've seen on many game lands statewide. It takes a lot of different management practices to reclaim those areas that are, consider them over-vegetated, a lot of times with invasive shrubs that are really poor for habitat. So that's a lot of the work that we do on game lands, is trying to get those invasive species under control and coming up with ways to manage them into the future that can be applied efficiently. And there again is one reason that prescribed fire is becoming such an important tool in our toolbox, is that we can use fire in a lot of those areas every 3 to 5 years, keep some of those invasive shrubs from coming back in the dominance that they once had. So in addition to our primarily forested game lands, we also have some gems that are on better agricultural ground. Most of these occur in the valleys of Pennsylvania, and most of the surrounding landscape is intensively farmed in row crop. So it's very important on those game lands that we provide habitat throughout the year. In a lot of cases, we're managing things for cover and diverse food sources and intermixing that through our own plantings or the use of sharecroppers with some row crop agriculture on the game lands as well. It's just a matter of coming up with that balance, making sure you have food, cover, and multiple habitat aspects through the whole year. A lot of that work is done by our food and cover crews, and to keep those habitats mostly in an early successional state on farmland game lands.
Habitat work is done continually to maintain various successional states, such as fields, shrubland, and young forest. The objective when managing habitats is to intersperse habitat types to maximize diversity and hunting opportunity.
Wetland habitats are very important in Pennsylvania, and it's not a habitat that we have as widespread as some other states. In the glaciated parts of the northwestern Pennsylvania, wetlands are much more common, and some of the things that we do as far as wetland management is controlling water levels throughout the year. So engineering water control structures for various wildlife needs. Another interesting wetland type habitat we have in Pennsylvania that's very unique is the Susquehanna River Islands. Now, those islands are extremely important for migrating waterfowl and a really unique feature that we've had the opportunity to acquire up and down the Susquehanna River.
In 1965, over 50 years ago now, the millionth acre of game lands was purchased in Venango County and became State Game Lands 253. This was a huge victory for wildlife in the state and was the first of its kind in the country. Pennsylvania has more than 29 million acres in total and today boasts 23% in public lands. This is third only to Alaska and California. 1.5 million acres are state game land holdings, places reserved for wildlife habitat and to carry out the tradition of hunting and trapping in the Commonwealth. Public lands in Pennsylvania meet different types of needs depending on the property. There are several state agencies which own property. State parks' primary purpose is recreation and shared use with wildlife and are operated by DCNR. State forests are to be managed as ecosystems, as a renewable resource, and provide low-density recreation. But state game lands are reserved primarily for the purpose of hunting and trapping and to serve game habitat. Game lands provide cover for rare, threatened, and endangered species as well. Game lands boast a huge diversity of habitat types.
If you get really detailed, there are hundreds of habitat types on the game lands. The main habitat types are deciduous forests, oak, forests, northern hardwoods, mixed coniferous forests, also various kinds of shrublands, various kinds of herbaceous habitats, fields, and openings. But if you break those down into the minutiae of each kind, there are literally hundreds of different habitat types that are considered on the game lands.
Here, biologists can conduct research on a variety of wildlife species and have a diverse selection of cover types. State game lands are different in their purpose because they're acquired primarily by game funds, Pittman-Robertson funds, and state game land revenue, such as timber sales and surface impact mitigation funds. State game lands offer a potential for a return on our hunter's investment. They are not purchased with state tax dollars. In the early 1900s, $1 of each hunting license sale went to the purchase of new lands. Today, all hunting license fees go directly to the Game Fund. There are limitations, however, to what the Commission can spend per acre. This has changed over time, but the current limit of $400 per acre was set in 1987. To meet the difference in purchase price, the Pennsylvania Game Commission partners with many organizations to secure additional holdings. Practically from the very beginning, individuals have donated land and organizations have purchased property to donate to the Game Commission.
I'm just really grateful I had the opportunity to have the game lands.
It was the biggest, best thing in the world is to find a place that you could go.
The mountains and the quiet.
Didn't have to worry about signs, people telling you to get off their land or running you off or anything. It's just a great place to be because you have that flexibility.
And the people that I met on the trail will share stories, and that just stays with you for a lifetime.
Because of our rich hunting and trapping heritage in Pennsylvania, we are fortunate to have 1.5 million acres of diverse habitat on state game lands for wildlife.
I'm Matt Ho, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Game Commission. The Game Commission is our state wildlife agency. Our mission is to manage Pennsylvania's wild birds, wild mammals, and their habitats for current and future generations. We are funded by hunting license sales and federal taxes on ammunition and firearms, not by state tax dollars. Hunting licenses support all wildlife, not just game. But we haven't had a license increase since 1999, when a general hunting license went from $12 to $19. Marcellus shale money helped bridge the gap in our funding. Until now, those funds are starting to dwindle. As sportsmen and sportswomen, we know that hunting and trapping are vital to the state's economy and are of utmost importance to everyone concerned about the future of our wildlife resources in Pennsylvania. A look at license fees in similar states shows that we are not making an unrealistic request. Pennsylvania's hunting license fees are among the lowest in the nation. How will a license increase make a difference? As your wildlife agency, we will be able to continue to purchase lands, to manage habitat that will benefit our native birds and mammals, and continue to protect our threatened and endangered species. So in order to continue to create wildlife habitat, outstanding hunting opportunities, and give wildlife a voice, we request that you contact your state representatives and ask them for their support.